I'm Eduardo Norette with Campus Reform. Today I'm joined by Emily Kokot, one of our correspondents who goes to Rocky Mountain College in Montana. She's here today to talk to us about a series we're doing, talking to students and other individuals on campus who worked maybe an on-campus job, worked off or somewhere near campus that really, relied on the university community to bring in revenue to some of these businesses. Obviously, right now with the coronavirus, a lot of businesses have been affected. A lot of students have lost their jobs like many Americans across the country. So we wanted to talk to some of those students, talk about what their jobs meant to them and if it's going to affect them moving forward. So Emily, thanks for joining us. I want to get started on just what you used to do. What job or jobs did you have on campus before this? Have you always worked through school? Just walk the viewer a little bit through what your experience and what your life was as a student employee, as a student worker going to school.
Yeah, so since the first day of my freshman year at Rocky, I have worked in the Dean of Students office as a work study, and it's been just 3 times a week or 2 times a week this last semester just because of my class schedule. And so the pay wasn't great. I didn't get a whole lot of money from it, but my last paycheck was about $100, and as a poor college student, that really does go a long ways. So it's been unfortunate that I haven't been able to keep that job. The campus shut down right after our spring break, and at that point, I still had the option of going to work. But then a few days later, I was told that I wasn't going to be able to come back. So at that point, I just left campus. But that money really did help cover the cost of books, for instance, and reimburse me in that sense, and just help set money aside for paying off loans. The extra burden I have right now with my living situation is that I live on campus, or I was living on campus. I'm at home now with everything going on, but campus is still open. They're allowing students to stay there in the dorms if they wish, but because they're giving students the choice to leave or not leave campus, they're not reimbursing students for the lost cost of not being on campus. So even though I left, I'm still having to pay for my dorm, which is unfortunate. They haven't talked about reimbursing students at all for that yet. So I lost my job, and I'm still having to pay for the dorm that I'm not living in just because I feel it's best for me to be at home. So that's kind of been the burden that I've faced.
Sure. And that's really interesting about the dorm. I want to get to that in a second. But first, you started out, and we talked a little bit before this interview, and you were concerned about, you mentioned work study. I don't get paid that much anyway. I don't know if it's what you're looking for, but I think it's an interesting point. And I raise this because, as you mentioned, it may seem like a small paycheck to some people who are watching, or maybe people who haven't been connected to the campus life and what it's like for a student in a long time. But, as I was on a campus several years ago, books did cost several $100s a semester. Sometimes it would infuriate me. You would have to buy a book that maybe you would use once or twice the entire semester. So you talk about the fact that, getting this paycheck, you can probably pay off your whole books for the semester after working. I think in other instances, when I think back, I think an $100 or so paycheck would have covered food for me for maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks. So it's certainly important. And I think people are quick to forget because it was work study. And so I'm a little bit familiar with the program. It's a job that you're required to work on campus. And I believe part of your tuition is paid, if I have that correctly, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But going forward, and I'm sure you haven't heard anything like this yet, but I guess, have you thought about at all about the fact that maybe, the college could be cutting down some jobs because you're no longer technically working as part of the work study? Is that a program that's guaranteed for you in the future? Is it possible that you could lose the work study status and it could affect your education going forward? I mean, talk to me a little bit about how the program works and if you've had any reassurances that you will be able to participate, once campus reopens up.
Yeah, so I think the program's kind of different for every school. I go to a really small private school, but for me, just at that school, actually, I did not qualify for work study coming in. I qualified at a lot of public schools in the state, but not at Rocky. I'm assuming that's just because it's a private school, but they did make the exception because they needed that position to be filled in that particular office. So they gave me the position and they set a certain amount, like $1,000 or something that I could earn throughout the year. And that amount can be changed based on what they need and whatnot. So just because I've been fortunate enough to have that job since I came to school and I've had it ever since, they value that and realize that it's nice to be able to have somebody there who's, I guess, familiar with everything. And so as far as I know, they're going to let me continue to have that job throughout my time in college, but I'm sure that's not the case for some people, and some students may not be able to come back to that work study job if somebody else beats them to it. Yeah, and I guess another thing that you were saying with books and paying for things, food especially, I am still paying for a meal plan as well, just because they're not reimbursing me for that either. But that amount really helped pay for the cost of food. That paycheck also helped with books, like I was saying. Last year, I think it was, I took an economics class that required me to buy a book that was $250, and I used it once and I couldn't sell it back. I was told that I would be able to sell it back to the bookstore for like half the price, and then that never happened. So you just eat that amount. But if you have that extra paycheck from work study, it really does help.
Right. And then I want to ask you about the dorm. So at your college, were you guys required to go home because of the coronavirus? A lot of schools that we've been reporting on required their students to go home. Even if you weren't required to go home, I think most people certainly understand why you would have people feel more comfortable, more safe, and more, in this age of social distancing and quarantining. I think it's easier for people to be with their families back home. Because I'm just curious, if you were required to go home, or at least strongly encouraged, as a lot of schools are doing, and then the campus isn't reimbursing you for the dorm or for the meal plan, that does seem like a huge cost to force students to continue to pay for a service that they're not getting. And I imagine even if they didn't force you guys to go home, I bet you the dining hall isn't open. So, maybe you could have stayed, but I'm sure a lot of these on-campus services aren't operating the way they used to. So were you required to leave campus, or were you allowed?
So they did not require it. I think that's kind of how they're skating out of it. But they've sent quite a few emails to us. Like, it's just kind of gone downhill from there. The first one just said, everything's going to stay open. And then eventually got to the point where it's like, okay, we're strongly encouraging everybody to leave campus or stay home if they can. But even though I did decide to cancel my contract for housing, they told me that I would not be reimbursed at this point. And with the meal plan as well, I guess the cafeteria is still open, but I'm just eating that amount because they're not paying me back for my meal plan either, which that cost is horrendous. I mean, just about, when you figure the cost of my particular meal plan, it's about $12 or $13 a meal for 10 meals a week. So, I mean, that cost adds up like crazy. So it's frustrating.
Right. Well, I hope the situation gets better for you. My last question before we finish off here, and I want to leave the floor open if you have anything to add, but what would you like people to know? I think in the era we live in, a lot of people are quick to dismiss, Gen Zers, millennials, college students, dismiss a lot of the issues they go through because maybe rightfully or wrongfully so. There's sort of this idea of what's called a snowflake, the modern snowflake. But I think in that, and because a lot of people look at younger people through that snowflake lens, I think they do tend to dismiss a lot of the concerns and a lot of the issues that young people, in this case students, are facing. And so right now students are facing a very real financial uncertainty, and you talked about it. What is, one message, if you could talk to someone to kind of shine a light on the concerns that you and your fellow student peers are facing, what would you want these people to know? What would you want them to be aware of not only the suffering that many other Americans are going on through in the country right now, but that also students are part of this category?
I guess I would say that more students than you would think, they do try to work their whole way through college. They do try to get out of school with little to no loans if possible. And I know for me, I've I've tried my hardest to do that, and this whole situation with the coronavirus has just made it so frustrating because I mean, I don't have that work study job, and I may or may not be able to have the paid internship that I've wanted this summer, which will help me pay for my school fees in the future. And so it's just a burden that I guess a lot of people probably don't think about, that college students are financially responsible for themselves, and they have to find a way to pay for school, to create a better future for themselves, find a place to live, find food to eat, and it's difficult. So this situation doesn't make it any better.
Right. Well, Emily, I want to wish you luck in those situations you're facing right now, and keep us posted if Rocky Mountain College updates you guys on any sort of reimbursement, or at least for the food plan. But I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
How's it going? I'm Eduardo Norette with Campus Reform. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to subscribe to get our latest content, click right here. If you're interested in joining our team as a correspondent or an investigator, click there. And if you want to donate to make sure we can create more great content like this, click right here.